Let me know if this sounds familiar. You open up Steam, fully intent on finally booting up that game that's been sitting in your Play Next for 6 months. Finally installing that hidden gem you found on page 50 of your discovery queue. Or finally checking out that game your buddy gifted you 2 sales ago. After scrolling for a bit, you decide this sounds like way too much effort, and instead you open up that old faithful that you have hundreds or even thousands of hours in. But what about all those games sitting in your library that you never dusted off? Are any of them worthwhile? Are there any hidden gems lurking just below the surface? Could one of these unexplored titles become one of your new favorites? Like many of you, I find myself in the same situation. I decided it may be fun to try and tackle some of these while also documenting what I find. Maybe this could be entertaining or helpful to those in the same boat as me. Heck, maybe you have a few of these games sitting in your backlog as well. With that in mind, welcome to a new series that I have decided to creatively title Clearing the Backlog. In each episode of this series, we'll explore 3 random Steam games from my personal library. They may be old, they may be new, they may be obscure games that you likely haven't heard of, they may be popular games that I never got around to playing. They'll include games of all genres, with the only criteria being that I haven't spent a significant amount of, or any, time with them. We'll spend around 10 minutes on each game, which should be enough time to give a good overview of each, and give you enough info to decide if any of these may be worth checking out for you. So without any further ado, let's jump into Clearing the Backlog with 3 random Steam games. The first game on our list today is Star Wars Republic Commando. Republic Commando was developed by LucasArts, rest in peace, and released in 2005. The game is essentially a first-person semi-tactical shooter in which you play as the leader of an elite squad of clone commandos, basically during the events of Episode 2 and maybe a little bit of Episode 3. Currently sits at overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam, and will run you about $10 American. However, it frequently goes on sale for as low as $2.50 and is often available in various discounted Star Wars game bundles. With that price point, Republic Commando is well worth the price of admission, and very easy to recommend. Funnily enough, this is the perfect candidate for this series because I have a friend who recommended this one to me literally years ago, and I'm just now getting around to playing it. Which, I mean, yeah, that is kind of the point of the series, right? I have to say, I'm definitely glad I did check this one out. Real quick, before we go any further, I would recommend downloading and installing a third-party mod known as Star Wars Republic Commando Fix. This will fix a few minor issues and bring the game up to what you would expect in 2025. Basically, modern resolutions, higher FPS limits, better rendering, and just a smoother gameplay experience overall. The download is literally only 1 megabyte, super easy to install, like drag and drop a couple files, and functions seamlessly. All the footage I'm showing here was recorded with the Star Wars Republic Commando Fix active. So how about the game itself? Republic Commando is essentially a first-person shooter with some light tactical elements. The game takes place over 3 separate campaigns, with a total playtime of about 6 hours, give or take. Campaigns are pretty varied, with new enemies, weapons, and mechanics introduced throughout, but they all follow a pretty similar formula. You make your way through what is a fairly linear campaign. It's a lot of corridors and hallways without any, giant sprawling areas that give you too much freedom. But the dynamic element comes in that you're able to issue orders to your 3 squad mates. These can include things like activating objectives, manning turrets, taking sniper positions, or targeting specific enemies. Now, this isn't Splinter Cell or something, so the actual tactical element is fairly simple, but it does serve to make the game feel a lot more dynamic. If you need to hold a position, you may want to order your allies to cover specific hallways, right? You might want to order them to a grenade position. Instead of activating a control panel yourself, you can actually send an ally to do it. Or, if you want, you can go over and disarm the bomb while your allies defend you. All this is done with a single button, which is probably a side effect of the console version of the game, but it functions surprisingly well. You never really have to stop and figure out what to make your teammates do, and all of it can be done on the fly in the middle of the action with that single button press. The number of enemies attacking at any given time makes the combat pretty hectic, and you always need to stay on your toes. So the actual AI in Republic Commando is a bit of a mixed bag, I must admit. There were times toward the beginning where I was actually pretty impressed with how the squad would take cover, prioritize targets, and revive each other when they went down. Or you, because that's another thing that can happen. Then there were times as the game went on where I would turn around and my squad mates were literally like standing in the open, taking rockets in the face. However, as long as you kind of move your squad around effectively and give them the right orders, this is usually not a problem. Don't go in thinking you can just blindly shoot and ignore giving orders and you'll generally be fine, because you will have those moments where you turn around and your squad is not behaving in the most efficient way, shall we say. On a somewhat related note, the voice acting and characterization of your squad is legitimately excellent. The in-between story sections, the in-game banter, and the other voice lines really make each member of the team seem unique and likable, and you will look forward to the next time you get to have a little conversation with them.
You may recognize your next objective, the Prosecutor, an acclimated-class Republic assault ship under the command of Captain Martz.
The Prosecutor was our first home. We were stationed there for a long
The
time.
last patrol was the Corellia sector, defending Republic trade routes against separatist activity, but we lost contact with her over 2 weeks ago.
This is nowhere near Corellia. Have they gone rogue?
Not likely.
Respectfully, sir, it could be a trap.
Indeed, it could, Delta 4-0, which is why we're sending our most qualified squad to investigate. Someone important noted your excellence on Geonosis.
You hear that, Sev? Someone thinks I'm excellent.
Well, at least that makes two of you.
Delta Squad, prepare for low-gravity infiltration. Seal your suits. Good luck.
Now, one thing that actually really surprised me about Republic Commando is how challenging it can be at times. You know, in the modern day, you would probably expect a game like this to be like Babby's first shooter with absolutely zero difficulty, but there were sections where I was legitimately surprised by how challenging it was. Sometimes I would die instantly after making one wrong move, just get taken out by a rocket from across the map, that kind of thing. There's a regenerating shield, but even on normal difficulty, the enemies can take this out almost instantly. Fortunately, you can quick save at any time, and you can change the difficulty in the middle if it's a bit too challenging. The game also supplies ammo and health quite liberally, so that's not too much of an issue. However, if you're just spamming ammo, you can definitely run into situations where you put yourself at a severe disadvantage. The game is absolutely relentless with the waves of droids, Geonosians, Trandosians, and then some other enemy types that I won't spoil. It's cool because you do feel like a crazy powerful killing machine, but you also feel like you have to be a little careful and a little bit tactical with your gameplay at the same time. One thing I will say is a bit of a negative and may turn some people off is the fact that Republic Commando has a cliffhanger ending. I won't spoil exactly what happens, but needless to say, about 20 years later, it's doubtful we're going to get a sequel or a resolution to the story. It didn't ruin the experience for me personally, but I could definitely see it leaving a bit of a bad taste. Otherwise, there's really not much to complain about. The gameplay is simple, but solid. It's relatively engaging. The story is decent, the voice acting is excellent, and at the end of the day, the game will not take up really all that much of your time. Overall, a great experience, one that comes pretty highly recommended, especially at the low price point. If you've never played this game before and you're at all interested in sort of the little bit older Star Wars stuff, definitely check it out.
Pack it up, Delta. Thanks for the assistance, Captain.
Glad to be of service, Delta Squad. No one steals a ship from the Republic while we're around.
The next game on our list is Super Knight Riders. This game was developed by NecoWorks, who I believe is a solo developer, and released in 2016. Regular price is going to run you $5 American, but on sale the price can go as low as 99 cents. The easiest way to describe Super Knight Riders is it is essentially a Super Hang-On, or I guess you could say an Outrun clone. You choose a course or series of courses and make your way from start to finish. You're not actually racing the other bikes, but rather the clock. There's a constantly ticking down timer, and if you don't make it to the next checkpoint within the time limit, you lose. The other bikes are pretty much just there as obstacles, and are going to slow you down if you crash into them, but you're not looking at, first place, second place, that sort of thing. The game has a few different modes that essentially just boil down to how many courses and what order you play them in. The overall goal of the game, other than actually completing the courses, is essentially just time attack or score attack. You have the ability to play any particular section individually for practice, as each specific stage always plays out pretty much the exact same way, with the bikes and obstacles in the exact same positions. The end goal ultimately being to play through the entire circuit, where the different individual sections come up in order. Playing through the entire circuit of courses/stages is only going to take you about 17 minutes or so, but you will definitely need a little bit of practice before you're able to make it through. Graphics of Super Knight Riders are pretty good, if not remarkable, and the soundtrack is fitting, if again, not super remarkable or memorable. There are a few different track variations like a forest, a desert, a city, etc., and each of those then has other variations that are essentially the time of day, like various day-night states. Generally, though, these are just aesthetic, as the only thing you're particularly worried about are the bikers on the road. I will say, though, I particularly like the one variation that has the cherry trees and the falling leaves, as it looks pretty nice. Most of the music tracks are kind of rockish in nature. Again, not super memorable, but they suit the game well and kind of keep you in the action. I also did especially like this one synthwave kind of track. One thing that is actually kind of funny, if we're talking about presentation, is that the game pulls a little bit of a bait and switch with the anime aesthetic. So obviously, if you go on the Steam page or you look at the title screen, you're going to see this blonde anime girl, right? But in the actual game itself, you're basically just a red-suited rider wearing a helmet. Basically, if you never saw the title screen and you just saw straight-up gameplay, you wouldn't even know there was any sort of anime element. This is not necessarily a positive or a negative, but just something I found kind of funny. That said, in some of the artwork, you will get to see the character design and everything. So there's that. So, after all that is said and done, there's really not that much to Super Knight Riders. That said, if you paid $5 or better yet $1, I don't think there's really that much to complain about. You know, you're not expecting the deepest 60-hour experience for that price. I put in a couple hours over the time of completing all the circuits, getting 100% achievements, and then recording my footage here. And I don't really regret the time spent, but I doubt that I'll see myself going back and playing the game again anytime soon. However, it's worth noting here that there's actually a sequel in the works that's releasing at some point, and it looks like it's going to have a bit more content, and also have a little bit more of the anime aesthetic if that sounds appealing to you. Might be worth looking at when it finally comes out. So that's about it for Super Knight Riders. It's simple, but inexpensive and well put together for what it is. Would I recommend it? Probably. But I'm sort of the type that enjoys these shorter games that I can experience once or twice and then file away. I guess we consider this one a soft recommendation. Unrelated, the developer NecoWorks has a few other games that I've picked up and will likely appear in later episodes of the series, including ones that look quite a bit more interesting than this. But we will worry about that when it's time to worry about that. Anyways, on to the final game of this episode. Finally, we have Unstoppable Gorg. This game was developed by FutureMark and released in 2012. Actually, this appears to be their only game on Steam at the time of recording, and I'm unaware if they've released anything else on other storefronts. The game is regularly priced at $10 American, but will dip as low as 99 cents on sale. The game currently sits at mostly positive reviews. At its most basic, Unstoppable Gorg is a tower defense game. Yeah, remember when those were all the rage? But with a much more active gameplay style and an absolutely amazing aesthetic. I'm pretty sure I got this one in one of those indie game bundles around 2012, as I know it's been sitting in my Steam library for literally years. So before even looking at the gameplay, we have to talk about the game's aesthetic. Everything is done in this vintage 1950s sci-fi style. and this includes some absolutely awesome black and white live-action cutscenes with suitably cheesy voice acting and special effects. We're talking flying saucers on strings, that kind of thing.
Far beyond the orbit of Neptune, the scientists of Space Base Zulu discover Lowell's Planet X. One of the greatest questions of all time has been answered. Man is not alone in space. The world watches as telescopes reveal the strange cities of an advanced civilization. War hero Captain Atom and his fiancée Ariel, winner of the Miss Solar System pageant, travel to Planet X to greet our galactic neighbors. Celebration turns to panic as a vast armada of flying saucers is launched. Will Captain Atom arrive in time to save the scientists?
These really feel like you're watching some old sci-fi B-movie and are absolutely the highlight of the game. Really, the only thing missing would be the Mystery Science Theater 3000 guys giving commentary. And that would have been a funny concept for DLC. Everything else, from the music to the enemy and tower design, perfectly fits this aesthetic. And again, you really feel like you're in a 1950s sci-fi movie. I would actually say without hesitation that the cutscenes and aesthetic are the best part of the game, and these alone almost make the game worthwhile without even considering the gameplay. So, what about the gameplay? Well, at its core, Unstoppable Gorg is a tower defense. I know that at the time, and probably still today, I was suffering from a bit of fatigue when it came to that genre. It seemed like there were 500 million of those that were coming out at any given time. Still, Unstoppable Gorg sets itself apart with a much more active style of gameplay. So like in your typical tower defense, you can place towers or turrets at set points. However, in this game, you can actually rotate the various turrets around kind of an orbit to move your towers around. Now, the game is designed around this mechanic, meaning there are very few points that you can actually just sit back and let the game scroll, unlike in many similar games. Basically, you have to be constantly rotating the various orbits to move your towers into the correct positions. This is a pretty unique gameplay mechanic as far as tower defense goes, and makes Unstoppable Gorg pretty unique among many of its peers, definitely making the gameplay a lot more engaging. Now, this brings us to what is perhaps the most divisive element of the game, and that is the difficulty. Many people in the Steam reviews noted that the game is way too difficult, even on the easiest difficulty settings. And I have to say, I wouldn't necessarily disagree. The game gets absolutely hectic from the very earliest levels. When I think of tower defense, I typically think of that laid-back kind of style where you set your towers and let things play out. But unlike many similar games, you often feel as though you're struggling from the very beginning. You might think that the ability to move the towers around would make things more forgiving, but it's actually the opposite. Because the game is designed around this mechanic, you actually have to be thinking about it at all times. There's very little margin for error, and you have to account for not only the tower placement, but again, the optimal rotation. And that changes as the levels go on. This means that there's a lot of trial and error and memorization. And really, I would say that things are a little bit too hectic to allow for much adjustment on the fly. There are around 20 levels or so, I think, and I was already quite challenged at only a bit over a quarter of the way through the game. As many noted, and again, I wouldn't necessarily disagree, Unstoppable Gorg can get pretty frustrating when you're constantly realizing, oh, I needed to deploy that turret to this position, but I needed to do that 3 minutes ago, or, oh, I guess I should have rotated in that direction instead. I guess I better restart. So, all that said, I have a hard time calling the difficulty an explicit negative when it really comes down more to a difference in expectations. I think that whether or not this ruins or enhances Unstoppable Gorg is going to come down to what you were looking for when you installed it. Now, for me personally, I can say it probably is a negative. I was looking for kind of a light, laid-back experience similar to most other tower defense games, where I could sit back and admire the cheesy cutscenes and not really worry about too much else. I will readily admit that tower defense is not my favorite genre, and I really associate these games with sitting in a lobby waiting for a doctor's appointment, or sitting in a car waiting for somebody to come out of a store. You know, bite-sized chunks of gameplay where I don't really have to worry about too much. So I'm definitely not the most skilled at these kind of games, and basically this could be a get good situation. But as it stands, I didn't really feel motivated to finish the game, but that comes down more to it didn't fit what I was expecting versus it's something that's explicitly bad. So I would say if you're specifically looking for a tower defense game with a higher element of difficulty than is typical, this might be right up your alley. So all of that said, would I recommend Unstoppable Gorg? It's kind of hard to say. On sale at $1? Yeah, probably. At full price at $10? Probably not. The aesthetic alone really carries this one and makes it worth a look, as long as you know what you're getting into and what you should be expecting from the gameplay. And hey, there's also a free demo if you're not quite sure if this one is for you, so it's worth a look either way. Basically, to sum everything up in one sentence, it would be recommended with some caveats. But man, those cutscenes are great.
Captain Adam, don't be afraid. I'm sending my thoughts directly to your mind. I am Soraya, speaker for my people. We live peacefully among the clouds of Jupiter, yet I fear our cherished cities will be destroyed by the Gorg. Brave Captain Adam, won't you help me?
So, there we have it. 3 more Steam games cleared from the backlog. We're making some good progress here, ladies and gents. As I said last time, I have a ton of games still on the backlog, so we have plenty of material for many, many more episodes to come. If you have any particular hidden gems, or others, sitting in your backlog, feel free to let me know, and maybe we can cross-reference and see if I'll check those out as well. And hey, maybe I've motivated you to take a look at your backlog as well. That's about all she wrote for this one. I'll be back sooner rather than later with 3 more games from the backlog in the near future. Hope you look forward to it. Until then, I'd like to thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care, and God bless.